Before we get into the stories, I would like to let you all know that I'm taking story submissions to narrate. I will credit you in the description of the video unless you ask me not to, so if you have an experience or story in mind that you would like me to read, then you can email me at feedingonfear@gmail.com, and I will be sure to include it in my videos. Thank you so much for watching, and enjoy the stories. Mario's been a gaming icon and an idol for decades, present in near endless titles, and will likely be until the end of time. Although no years in recent memory has gone past without some type of Mario game being released, series fans will remember the nearly decade-long drought of traditional Mario platformers, much less games that would stick to the traditional Mario formula without deviating genres. From 1997 to 2005, there was only a single new one released, Super Mario Sunshine, with other games during this period being sports or party games. During the second part of this drought, the mysterious Super Mario 128 was the main focus of the fan base and gaming news sources at the time, like EA Gaming Monthly or various forums. No concrete information was ever given on the game, and eventually series creator Shigeru Miyamoto claimed it had simply been a series of test concepts that were never intended to be an actual game. He was indeed partly correct. When the rise of video and content creation rose on YouTube and other platforms, the build that many Mario fans would come to be familiar with would be a tech demo at Space World 2000, an event much like E3. Other than that, only rumors fueled the mythos behind the game. The mystery faded from memory as the Mario drought finally ended, and most people forgot about the game that had once been the center of every Mario fan's imagination, with the console wars getting more competitive at the time and with the rise of the Xbox and PlayStation. Miyamoto himself claimed in an interview when asked about Super Mario 128 that "you've likely already played it," referring to the fact that the tech demo at Space World served as the foundation for several Nintendo games such as Mario Galaxy and Twilight Princess. The Mario drought, in turn, corresponded with a negative era for Nintendo in terms of console sales as well as popularity, especially towards their IPs, which were being beaten out by rival IPs like Sonic the Hedgehog and Crash Bandicoot. The Nintendo 64 and GameCube did not have the financial successes of the earlier Nintendo Entertainment System and Super Nintendo, and by comparison performed poorly in comparison to rival consoles. For a company that took pride in game development that also relied solely on video games to make money, this was quite depressing for the higher-ranking employees who were attached to the company and felt its success or failure reflected on them personally, especially towards those who grew attached to some of these projects. Nintendo started working on a sequel to the 1996 Super Mario 64, the Nintendo 64 disk drive, shortly after the game was released. But during the late 90s, it became clear that they were not winning the console war, and that the N64 was a failure in the West, with it only barely being a success in Japan. The Super Mario 64 sequel was restarted from the beginning, since the company believed that there was not a substantial enough improvement over the original to turn the tides of the market battle against rival brands. Seeing the generally more gritty, grainy, and realistic and violent games on Sony's PlayStation, the market leaders of Nintendo considered making a Mario game, as well as for many other IPs that were closer in tone to what the public seemed to want. There was quite a bit of internal conflict over how far to go with this new direction, and the new Mario was clearly not going to be ready until Nintendo's next console, the GameCube. This tone for darker games would be seen with the release of several dark Nintendo games at the time, like Majora's Mask, Twilight Princess, Luigi's Mansion, Paper Mario, The Thousand-Year Door, and Star Fox Assault, all of which were praised for not only being games of high quality, but changing the status quo of the franchises associated with them, due to their more diverse means of either gameplay or storytelling. This trend would carry on even after the console wars died down, with Nintendo experimenting with dark subject matter in video games. The only hint of this released to the public regarding the Mario game, however, was a comment by Miyamoto. He apparently thought Mario and Luigi should act more like grown-ups in their games for the then soon-to-be-released GameCube in an interview. The new Mario project was ultimately split into two games. The aforementioned Luigi's Mansion, which reflected the darker tone that many felt the series should turn to, although it was still toned down quite a bit. And Super Mario Sunshine, which went in a complete opposite direction, following a more linear and traditional aesthetic to Mario 64. Both were released within a year of the GameCube's launch. Nintendo felt confident that their new system and Mario games, as well as the other names mentioned, would return them their former glory as market leader. As those familiar with gaming history and the console wars know, they did not. The GameCube did even worse in market share than Nintendo 64, and the mass market's taste shifted even more towards violent, realistic games. It also didn't help that Nintendo's revival at the time, Sega, was struggling against their former rival due to the popularity of the PlayStation, which only emphasized the public's wants at the time. During this period, the somber and melancholic mood at Nintendo intensified, and the darker Mario project was revived for a short time period, this time code-named Super Mario 128. The title was derived not only from the test space at Space World 2000, but also because the GameCube was a 128-bit console. Nintendo wished to show off the power of the GameCube to the rest of the market. It isn't clear exactly what happened at Nintendo during this period. As we know, nothing called Super Mario 128 was ever released publicly or shown, other than that tech demo at Space World. A group of leakers at the time revealed that the internal strife at Nintendo during the later N64 era, and revealed Nintendo's policy at the time for spokespeople when talking about the recent events regarding the Mario drought and the console wars. That policy would be that they had to agree to refuse to discuss what was happening during the time of the GameCube's failure. This would explain why Nintendo's marketing attitude at the time wasn't as aggressive as Sega's or Sony's. One of the leakers in question leaked a prototype of Super Mario 128 online. It can be played on the Wii Homebrew channel, the various online file sharing forums and ROM sites at the time, as it ran on Super Mario Sunshine's engine. The reaction Nintendo displayed at the time was without a doubt the biggest display of the protective nature of their IPs. Links to either the whole game, the ROM, the assets, and even some of the sites that had the source code and game leaked to it were struck down or forced to close down under the threat of getting a DMCA takedown by Nintendo. It was almost as if the project had never existed. Even after the incident, Nintendo took a staunch and harsh approach to copyright to make sure another leak like this would never happen again. As in 1999, a similar leak for Mario 64's beta assets, as well as the mass leaking of other Nintendo files, was made and dubbed the Omen Archives. At the time, I was an avid member of various online forums and communities such as the Something Awful forums, as well as 4chan, and at the time, moderators of those sites, or specifically their gaming boards, had cracked down on leaks in general, by either banning those associated with them, or purging and clearing any chat sections that managed to mention them, even in the most minor way, as Nintendo's legal actions at the time had set a precedent. However, during this time I was able to get my hands on a link, personally archive it to a Mediafire page that I had uploaded to my account years ago. Furthermore, I was able to get in contact with the leaker, and in exchange for being guided on how to start up the game, he requested I teach him how to use VPNs, as well as making his address hard to trace, as well as his emails, as I was a tech support person during this time in the early 2000s, and I figured that since he was the main culprit behind the leaks, he was on the run from law enforcement, as when I contacted them, they seemed scared and almost paranoid about the contents of the game. I chalked this up to them being paranoid. However, why would an experienced leaker be afraid of being caught all of a sudden? After many attempts, I was able to get the game to work and uploaded it to a USB stick that I was able to attach to my Wii and play it through the homebrew channel. The following is a recollection of my time playing it. So the game was clearly an early beta. The title screen was nothing but white text, saying Super Mario 128 against a black background. There was no options menu or save file selection either. The text, however, was blocky, like the normal Super Mario font, so I figured it was close to being finished. I had difficulty in taking the screenshot of the title screen at the time due to my camera being a low quality. After the title screen, the game started with a fade to white, like how Mario 64 begins. Bowser's laugh from Super Mario 64 looped in the background with less bit crush in the sound effect. Meanwhile, a plain text box displayed this dialogue. Mario, I have taken Princess Peach, and she will not live to see another sunrise. Don't try anything funny unless you want to hasten her death. You know where to find me. Don't keep me waiting. The game certainly was seeming like it went for a darker tone. After I made the text box go away, I was pushed right into the game. First thing I noticed was Mario's character model. He looked about as detailed as his Luigi's Mansion model, and with him he was equipped with a sash with various pieces of plumber-related gear, like a cartoony-looking hammer, a plunger, and a flashlight. However, that wasn't what piqued my interest. His head appeared to be ripped straight from one of the N64-era Mario Party games, which made the model look unfinished and kind of uncanny. The setting was a sky level. The skybox resembled the skybox from Bomb Battlefield. However, it looked stretched and slightly pixelated due to the size of the level and the quality of the image in general. There were some simple wooden platforms floating in the air. The rest of the area was just several clouds scrolling in the background to make the skybox pop out a little more. They were quite graphically impressive, more realistic than the usual cartoony puffs in Mario games. There was no music or full voice samples, but there were sound effects when he jumped. Jumping was more restrictive than in any other Mario game. He didn't jump as high in the air as he normally did. He had little control over his movement in the air. The different types of jumps, like the triple jump, which were in every 3D Mario, weren't even present, maybe to suit their more realistic tone. I played through the monotonous level, and there was nothing especially notable about the gameplay. Enemies didn't seem to have been added yet, which made things significantly easier. I just jumped from platform to platform, and it wasn't even hard. Until what happened next. As I continued, I noticed the graphics gradually changing. The sky became more and more obscure until it was entirely composed of clouds, and the background gradually turned to a dark gray. After this, it started to rain, and I'd almost fallen off the small wooden platforms a few times, but I was able to reach the end of the level, where I reached a small platform with a toad on it. The toad looked like the Luigi's Mansion model, however it had a depressed expression on its face. And when I landed on his platform, his dialogue appeared. You're old news, Mario. You're not special anymore. You couldn't even stop Bowser from kidnapping the princess. You already failed to save your brother. What makes you think you can convince us that you can save our leader? We'd be better off without you. Just give him what he wants, and he'll leave us alone. This made me feel kinda confused and uncomfortable. What happened to Luigi? What did Mario do to make the kingdom turn on him? I didn't have much time to ponder this, as after the text box went away, I no longer had control of Mario. He just stood there for a second, then turned around and walked off the platform. His body seemed to go limp as he fell, and whilst falling, the visible sound of wind could be heard, with his hat flopping on his head, but not falling off. There was a seemingly panicked expression on his face, his mustache even drooping a little, and his eyes squinting a little before something became visible below him. Eventually it was revealed that there was a realistic, modern city under the world. The buildings looked neglected with splotches of dark gray on the ivory and light gray colored concrete buildings. But there were people on the street. Mario hit the ground with a kinda realistic sounding thud, but he didn't explode or show any visible damage or anything. He just laid there, no gore in sight. The impact caused a large dent in the ground, with cracks surrounding the hole, and the people in the city were just walking by, ignoring his presence. The people resembled PlayStation 1-styled human models, with the female models slightly resembling Peaches. However, their faces were blank, like they hadn't been fully modeled yet. This went on for a few minutes. Eventually, people stopped appearing and the sky began to darken and warp into the skybox for Big Boo's haunt. The screen faded to white as if it was a transition, and then faded to black. Mario got up and I was back in control, but he couldn't jump at all. He walked with a limp and a reduced speed. The large buildings didn't appear to be visible anymore, having changed to large trees and mushrooms with what appeared to be holes in them, which made them resemble doors and windows. I just walked down the path for a while with what seemed like bricks and other rubble scattered across the floor. What did this mean? Was this a level transition? Or was this something else? Eventually I found a small house that seemed out of place among the larger mushrooms and foliage. When I approached the house, it resembled a 1980s bungalow-type house. However, it had more cartoony graphics than the buildings from earlier, with its design also taking some inspiration from Mario's house from Paper Mario. As I approached the door, Mario opened it and the screen went black and some text appeared. House of Torn Memories. This seemed to be the level title. It only had 1 star available, which was seemingly in stark contrast from the first 10 minutes of gameplay, which didn't have an objective other than platforming and exploring. When I pressed a button to choose the star, the screen faded back to Mario. He was inside the house from before. Everything seemed bigger than it should have been. Not enormous, but scaled as if Mario was a small child or like a nimble short adult. The house was well decorated and filled with normal objects. However, they were covered in dust and had signs of neglect. There were no people on the ground floor, just things like busted lamps, windows, and other day-to-day objects. I found a door that opened to a set of stairs going down, leading to a basement. In the basement, I found a dilapidated couch and a broken patch of planks on the floor. However, what really caught my attention was what was on the couch. It seemed like it was Luigi. Confused yet slightly comforted, as I'd finally found another NPC to at least make the game feel less lonely. Well, it felt that way at first, until I heard what he had to say. You let Bowser do this to me. Every day of my life is misery because of you leaving me at his mercy. The only time in my life when I finally escape your shadow is when I'm in pain. I hate you. Just give Bowser what he wants, and spare the princess what happened to me. You'll at least do some good to make up for what you did. I was starting to get really disturbed by now. How had a Mario game containing this been programmed to this extent? I went up to Luigi to get a good look at him to see what was wrong, only to see something unsettling and confusing. One of his feet was missing. However, there was once again a lack of gore or detail. His face looked as if the color had been drained. His face drooped and hung low alongside his bristly mustache, and his eyes were white, like he'd been blinded. I went to sit down with him for a while as I pitied him. However, before I could do so, his model faded out. Without any control, Mario fell to his knees and began to weep. Before he could mourn any longer, I heard a large crash sound from just outside the house. Mario seemingly regained his composure. However, when I traveled up the flight of stairs to get to the main floor, the whole scene had changed once more. His house was now a pile of burnt planks and sharp stones that damaged him. The skybox had changed to lethal lava lands, and the main area had shifted back to the city. However, the buildings looked different. Now they looked like the houses from Paper Mario, and the design as a whole resembled the main village area around the Mushroom Castle. Mario now donned this tenacious and fearless face, dashing through the burning village. Bowser's airships floated above the village, raining down a barrage of cannonballs, water balls, and bullet bills. Toads were seen fleeing the scene, some even having a fire texture on them. cross eyes to show that they were in pain and panicked. After traversing the burning village and fighting through a horde of Koopas and Goombas, I reached the main bridge of the castle, but something was off. What appeared to be Bowser seemed to have broken through the bridge from below and landed in front of me. I say appeared to be because he was nothing like the way Bowser is usually rendered or depicted. This draconic reptilian monster in the game had Bowser's basic brownish yellow and green color scheme, but he looked a lot scarier and more intimidating than any Bowser model I'd seen before. His arms and legs were way longer and bulkier in relation to his body, and ended in sharp claws. His green had a faded bluish-green color. The shell didn't look like it had spikes glued on. They were more jagged and organic-looking, this rusted metal texture. The face had small but intense, pure black dilated eyes, and a mouth full of these nasty yellow teeth took up far more space than they should have. Mario was cowering in fear from this thing, but still retained his expression, and a dialogue box appeared. "You've kept me waiting long enough. That brother of yours put up a good fight, though I must say. But that's besides the point." After hitting the continue button, Bowser reached one of his hands from behind him, and in his hands he had the squirming and panicked princess with an expression of pure fear and anguish. "Does Peach have to die like your brother, or will you surrender and end all of this?" I still didn't have control. Mario just stood there, shivering for several seconds before nodding his head. The Koopa began to grin sinisterly and released Peach from his grasp. However, Bowser without warning then impaled Mario with his claws. Again, there was no blood, but it was clear from the animation and sound effects that the sharp digits had gone straight through his body. He squirmed for a while making these weird, struggling, hacking noises. I felt sick watching this. It wasn't gory, but the sound effects made me feel uncomfortable and questionable, each cough sounding more and more nasty and unwell. And in one swift motion, Bowser dragged Mario up to his face. He slung Mario backwards and onto his head on the bridge. Again, no graphic details, but his model was just being destroyed. The game then cut to a POV shot of Mario with the sound of Bowser's footsteps going away and growing more distant, with his laugh being heard, or blacking out. Peach would run to the screen and observe him before weeping. The screen faded to black, and in white text another level name appeared: Mario's Eternal Home. His character model was whole again when the level started. However, there was a major difference. His head looked in proportion with his body and no longer resembled the N64 era Mario. Mario was the only thing on the screen besides the black background. He was floating, as if in space. I could somewhat control him, but it felt more like I was deciding the general direction in which he would stumble rather than fully deciding his movement. As I drifted towards no apparent destination, some voices faded in. They were echoing and deep, telling Mario that he was worthless, that the world no longer had any use for him, and that everyone would be better off if he was dead. Among these echoes were Bowser's laughs. High-pitched feminine crying was layered on top of the voices after a while. It sounded like it was supposed to be Peach's cries. This really disturbed me. I found myself fighting back the urge to unplug the game and let out a few tears. It was already 1 a.m. I didn't want to be alone on a dark autumn night, and the depressing atmosphere of the game didn't help that. For reasons that I couldn't really understand, this was affecting me on an emotional level. Voices and aimless wandering went on for several minutes, until it all stopped when I spotted a light gray speck in the distance. I moved towards it. It took a really long time to reach. It grew closer at a much slower rate than it should have. Things beginning to render in the empty black void like faded, faceless toads, Goombas, Koopas, and Boos, even the strange humans from earlier. Objects like small mushrooms and even a few trees began to render too. I was close enough to make it out. I saw it was a tombstone, a very detailed one, cracks in several places. and a lot of noise in the texture. When I got right next to it, I could see writing on its surface. It simply displayed a single word: innocence. I turned off the system right after reading it. Well, at first it seemed like an overreaction. In the moment, I saw something that made me react fast. From the void, I saw something sprinting towards Mario with the sound of bomb explosions, and stomping getting closer and closer. Without any hesitation, I turned off my Wii. Couldn't even get a good look at the thing. And from my memory, I remember it slightly resembling Mario's model, though it was stretched out to this inhuman length. The only thing colored on the model were its gloves, and the emblem where his M should be on his hat. It didn't have any animations or a walk cycle. Instead of sprinting, the model appeared to move like a statue sliding on ice. What was that supposed to even be? What lies beyond this point in the game is beyond me, but for the sake of my sanity, I think it's best for me that I don't know what lies beyond that point. As for the media fire link, we expected Nintendo took action and struck it down. It was for the better, if I'm being honest. I'd rather stay as innocent as I can for the time I have left, and never have the opportunity to see what would have happened if I'd not turned off my console in time. Now, I still have to ask one question about the ending. Whilst the rest of the game was gritty and dark, it could arguably have been swept under the rug by Nintendo. What was in those last few moments, or even hours of gameplay, that made Nintendo wish to scrap the entire project?